Welcome to Take the Lead, Change the Game, a podcast for women leaders looking to deepen their knowledge, their skills, and find enjoyment in the process. We are powered by Software Leadership. Software Leadership is a cohort-based coaching company experience to help fuel courage and ignite impact amongst women professionals. I am Mindy Galati, and I'm here with my co-host, Lindsay Goldford-Gray. We are the co-founders of Safra. Together, we bring a blend of leadership coaching, strategy, and lived experience to help women navigate challenges, seize opportunities, and lead with confidence. And today we're going to talk about something that we've actually been hearing a lot about from multiple women we work with as recently as just this week, how our light sometimes will dim and our confidence will wane when men are in the room. We have really been hearing from folks that we're coaching, leaders that we're involved with, that women can be scared to take up space, to speak up, to ask questions. Some women have expressed that they're worried that they won't know what they're talking about, or they won't appear to know what they're talking about, and they really hold themselves back. We had last week, we had somebody on our podcast named Muna. She talked about being kind of scared to ask questions. And so we thought today we want to dive in and think about this topic today. Lindsay, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first question we want to ask ourselves is, why is this even happening, right? Like, why are there so many times where women feel this way because they're the only woman in the room, or they're one of the only women in the room? And so I just sort of want to ground us in statistics and demonstrate just how real this is. Mm-hmm. So one of the first things I want to talk about is there's something called the broken rung. And basically what that is that this disconnect, this barrier to women advancement happens very early in women's careers. So for about every 100 men promoted from an entry-level position to a manager role, there's only about 81 women. So this is like right from the jump, right? First promotion into management, we're at a deficit. Across major US companies, women account for around 22% of executives and 27% of senior managers as of 2024. And only around 7% of companies have a female CEO or board chair. Only around 31% of board positions for S&P 500 companies were held by women as of 2022. And then women make up just 10.4% of Fortune 500 of CEOs in Fortune 500 companies as of 2024. So across the board, right, at the executive level, at the highest leadership levels, and then down from there, women are underrepresented. So this feeling of, oh, I'm the only one here, I'm one of the only ones here, or this fear is very real and grounded in something very objective.
Yeah. And I work with lots of executive teams in companies across the country. And this is exactly what I see. And so we have the research, we have the lived experiences of women in leadership. I have never been in a boardroom or C-suite meeting where women outnumber men. Like I don't see it. And so we want to really talk about this because it has been so interesting for Lindsay and I that this keeps coming up in a lot of the conversations that we're having with our coaching clients and our coaching cohorts in our podcast interviews. And so we wanted to spend some time really thinking about the consequences of this and then some tips maybe to help guide you through this. And please add your comments to our social media posts, ask questions. I think this is something that we all should dive a little bit more into, because awareness can help you lead to some good actions, and you're not alone in this. So the consequences of women sort of being, the only one or one of few, and sensing that they are not maybe welcome, not included. Really, one of the biggest things I think we have to be aware of is the consequence that women are less likely to enjoy their work and stay in their jobs. And we spend a tremendous amount of our time at work. I mean, this is what we do all day. And so when you don't feel good and you don't enjoy it, that is why you leave your job. And if you feel excluded and you don't feel included, you're going to leave. And so that we want to know that consequences are actually pretty huge in terms of just overall wellness and happiness. The other thing that's interesting is as women rise in leadership, their visibility heightens, and they may be one of the only ones or the only one at the table. So their performance, their actions get scrutinized. I see this all of the time. We see this a lot in discrimination cases where women are held to different standards and different expectations than men because they are more visible. But what's also odd, and Lindsay, I want to get your thoughts on this, is women can feel both increased visibility, but also invisible at the same time. So there's sort of this double-edged sword where if you are the only woman or one of the only women, it's obvious, it's visible, but then you can feel invisible because of what we heard from some of the folks we've talked to, that they shrink, they don't ask questions, they're worried how they're going to be perceived. What do you think about that, Lindsay?
Yeah, I think that's super common. I was just listening to an episode on the Lean In podcast as I was thinking about these things this morning. And, they gave a couple of funny, not funny examples, one of which a woman was the only woman in the room. And the men were all talking about like their wives going into labor and what the childbirth experience was like. And nobody asked her any questions. And it's like, she just wasn't. Yeah, she wasn't in the room. And then another woman was talking about how she had a co-founder who was male and they were doing a lot of pitching. And the co-founder was like, "You're letting me down. I wish you would speak up more." And she was like, "Oh, next time you just watch." And he was so shocked as he changed his posture to sort of pay attention that nobody asked her any questions. And so I think, but then, if we don't subscribe to sort of stereotypical gender roles, we will get picked apart. And so it's a very real thing where people are looking at us more closely, or maybe I should say more critically. But then we are not part of the in-group. And so thus sort of taking on a cloak of invisibility, I think, as my children would say.
Yeah. And, one thing I want to bring up, and then I want to talk about a pretty severe consequence that you made me think of, Lindsay. I had a client a while ago, big, huge company, very profitable, publicly traded, all the things. And when I sat with their CEO, I was hired by their general counsel to come in to do some culture and leadership work. And when I sat with the CEO, he said I was the first woman to sit in his office, like alone. Like it was like he felt he was so uncomfortable. And it was so interesting because I wasn't uncomfortable. I'm used to being in that position, but he was so uncomfortable having me in his office, giving him advice. And so, and I never, I worked with them for a long time, but it was just so interesting because it was like, wow, like there are companies that have been around for 60 years that are huge, 10, 20,000 employees, that there's not even a woman that walks in that CEO's office alone. She's either an assistant or with someone, but she's not in there on her own accord. So that was interesting. But one consequence I want to bring up, and then Lindsay, I want to hear what you think as well, is the likelihood of being sexually harassed increases the higher you are in an organization. And I always find that wild when I teach harassment discrimination classes. I always bring this up because I think a lot of times we think of sexual harassment as a manager doing it to a subordinate, or the younger women or less experienced women are going to be subjected to it. It's actually the opposite. So the higher you go as a woman, your chances of being sexually harassed increase. And I think that is, there's power related to that. There's also because you are more visible and you often are one of the only ones. And so harassment, and I always find it interesting when I read sort of the cases and the situations where women in leadership are sexually harassed. It's pretty significant. And so I want to bring that up because that is a consequence of what we're talking about, and it's a pretty severe one. Lindsay, what do you think, and what other consequences do you see?
Yeah, that's a very severe one, and honestly quite shocking. When you told me that earlier today, I was really, really surprised. Another one is, this concept that everybody's probably heard of called tokenism. And essentially what that means is that one person represents the entire group, right? And this is part of the heightened scrutiny. So like if you're the only woman in the room, you represent all women. And so not only are people are scrutinizing you more, but you are in some ways like implicitly understanding that pressure that like, oh, everyone's looking to me to see if, women can fill the CEO seat, or women, a woman can do this job, or what I need to be warm and I need to be competent and I need to be all the things because I'm representing this group. And it's another like sort of a sub consequence of that is that stereotypes can abound. So if you just have one person representing the whole group, then it's like when the one person does something, it's like, oh, women are blah, 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 fill in the blank. And so that can be a very severe consequence, of course, to the individual, as we saw, Mindy, from the first thing you said, that women are less likely to be happy and more likely to leave their jobs, but also for the culture of the company. And I mean, as we see, like, the innovation of the company and the creativity of the company. And so it just kind of goes from there. Yeah. So let's turn to tips. And I will say, like, I want to caveat this of like, this is not women's problem. So this is not like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get it done.
Or it's all on your shoulders to fix all of this. Yes, for sure.
This is not like women go in and fix it. This is the world we live in. This is our current reality in many situations. And so how do we best react and behave and like think in our current reality? So just a caveat there. The first thing is so a number of the things that, Mindy, that you and I heard in the last several weeks from women is this whole like, I don't know if I'll know what I'm talking about, right? Which is really interesting because especially like the women that we've heard this from all know what they're talking about.
They're experts. They're amazing.
Very competent. And so when you're thinking about your self-talk before you go into one of these meetings or during the meeting, like it is important to take space to explicitly remember and remind yourself that you know what you're talking about, right? And that you are there for a specific purpose and you are invited into that room for a specific person. And damn it, you deserve it. And so, there's a number of different things people can say to themselves. I mean, Mindy, you and I were with a client earlier this week, and I said, you are the best this type of lawyer in the state of Texas. And I wholeheartedly believe that about this person. And then you were like, write it down, say it to yourself. It's true. And so, remind yourself who you are and why you're there, because you deserve it. Mindy, what tip do you have next?
Yeah. One thing I want to quickly say about that is one of the mantras you can have is like, you wouldn't be there if you didn't deserve it or you weren't smart enough, like you just wouldn't. So, but the one thing I want to bring up is that I work with mostly men. So I spend most of my days with men in the C-suite level, executive men. That's who I spend my time with. I also coach and give strategic advice and guidance to many, many, many CEOs, and they are all men. So I have yet to work with a woman. No, I worked with one woman CEO, but like dozens and dozens and dozens of male CEOs. And here's what I want you to know. Like, they are often feeling the same insecurities that you are. They really are. So they may come off differently, and they may have strength in numbers in that there may be 9 men there and 1 woman. But what I work with these men on oftentimes is they have the same fears. They have the same need for advice. They have the same worry to ask questions. So there's this concept in public speaking, which I sort of never understood, but it's the thing we all know, which is like when you go to give a public speech, imagine everybody naked and it'll make you feel less awkward. I don't know. I don't want to imagine people naked, but I think the point is like when you walk into a room full of men, like understand that at least half of them, if not most of them, have their own hangups, insecurities. They may have said their own mantra walking into that meeting. And, you deserve to be there and you're smart, and they're looking to you for guidance. The best CEOs that I know, that I work with, and I've had the privilege of working with, are those who say, I don't know these things, so I'm going to assemble a team of experts to come in. And so I want us to just be thinking about that, as well as that, you're not walking into a group of men who are like, I know everything. And maybe they say that out loud, maybe they pop their chest out sometimes, but believe me, they don't feel that way, because men are humans too, and they have the same issues and they have the same hangups, not rooted in patriarchy, misogyny, and sexism, but often rooted in other things. And so I just want to let you have a little insight into what they're going through as well.
Yeah, for sure. If you find yourself headed into a male-dominated space and it's causing you some concern, whether it's because you feel insecure or because you're worried you're not going to get heard, or be allowed to take up space, you should find yourself what's called a sponsor. So I quickly want to clarify the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. So a mentor is someone that, you have a one-on-one relationship and they sort of advise you about career advancement, work-life balance, anything that anyone can mentor someone on. Mm-hmm. A sponsor is more public. So a sponsor is someone who will take you out into the world. They will make professional connections for you. They will lift you up to other people. They will, quote unquote, promote you, meaning like sing your praises to others. And so if you are able to, and this is not possible in 100% of scenarios, but if you are able to find if you're going into an all male space, obviously a male sponsor, and just say, hey, I really have some things to share. I'm a little nervous about sort of speaking up affirmatively, and I'm concerned I'm not going to get asked questions. Do you mind asking me what my opinion is? Or do you mind talking about the discussion that we had and saying, Lindsay and I just had a conversation before this. She has a great idea. Lindsay, can you share it with the group? Mm-hmm. Whatever it is. But women need both male and female sponsors because, of course, we need women promoting us out in the world, women that are in positions higher than us. Mm-hmm. But then also we need male sponsors as well, because the men are often dominating these spaces, right? And so we need those folks to be out there, saying good things about us, asking our opinions, all of that. Mm-hmm.
And that's just good. That's good strategic advice to build relationships too. If you go to someone and you're like, hey, can you back me up? Can you ask me a question? Can you you start to build that relationship. Yeah. One of the sort of tips I want to offer, and this is not for the women, so this is for the men, and hopefully we have some men listening. Men play a significant role in this, right? And we could spend hours on that part. But what I want to say is there's an excellent book that I use in a lot of workshops I teach on gender equity and women in work. And it's written by men for men. And so this book is called Good Guys: How Men Can Be Better Allies for Women in the Workplace. It's by two gentlemen named Dave Smith and Brad Johnson. These are two white, male, older businessmen. And they have podcasts too, which are excellent. And they just talk about tips for men on how can you make the space more open and comfortable for women, and what should you really do? Because this is not, like we said at the top of the hour, this is not women's problem. Yeah. There's ways we have to function in this, but men have a role to play too. So if you ever have an opportunity to check this book out or look at the podcast, send it along to the men that you work with. I use it. Men read it. They have a very good reaction to this book. I have had lots of male executives read this book. I'm about to do a panel in a couple of weeks with male executives at an engineering firm who have read the book, going to talk about it. So let's keep that in mind as another aspect of this. Lindsay, do you have any other tips?
Yeah, I think the last thing I will say that came up, in a conversation, Mindy, that you and I were having with someone earlier this week is don't forget that you can opt out of spaces that don't serve you, right? So, in this context, it was specific to job interviews. Mm-hmm. So, if you are interviewing for a position and you go into a panel interview and they're all men, take note of that. That's not a club that you have to join, right?
Yeah.
And I think, Mindy, you and I do a lot of talking with people about abundance versus scarcity mindset. And I know oftentimes when we're looking for jobs, we're, concerned and we want to take the job, that comes our way. And, there's all kinds of different calculations there. But just remember that when you are looking to join a collaboration or job interviewing, that you can sometimes opt out of that. So if that's going to be detrimental to your career or to your well-being, take note of that and make decisions accordingly.
Yeah.
That's kind of the last tip I have.
Yeah. And I think it's an important one because, if you walk in a room and you're constantly feeling uncomfortable, like we do have options, and sometimes you also need to raise that, like, hey, when I walk in this space, I don't feel comfortable. Not everyone's aware of that. And so, but yeah, find places that, that want you. And especially in a job interview, because you have a lot more power before you get the job often than when you get the job, because you get to interview them, you get to ask the hard questions. So I love that.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I think that's all we've got time for today. Anything to add, Mindy?
Nope. I just appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, me too. I think this was a good one and a hard one. And I'm really glad to have this conversation with you. So
awesome.
Take care, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye.